Welcome everyone to the February 15th, 2021 monthly meeting of the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association. We'll continue admitting people as we go along here. Okay, just go over the agenda quick, and the agendas are kind of a work in progress starting from the middle of the week right up till the day of the meeting. So you may see some slight adjustments here versus the agenda that's on the website, but it's pretty close, and we can always update anything that you may have missed here. We can get it out to you. Okay, so couple of announcements. As usual, we are looking to try to get some East Norwalk folks into some of the government appointment openings. There are a number of openings which we posted in the last email, but of particular interest, there are now two alternates open for the Zoning Commission. And given all of the zoning issues that we've had in East Norwalk lately, it would be good to see if we can get some community members to volunteer to put their name in the hat, submit a resume for zoning commission alternate. If you're interested in those, you can email into us at info@eastnorwalk.org, and we'll get you some more information on what the role is of zoning commissioners and when they meet and what's involved in that. And then just as a reminder, the community shredding event is in April, so we want people to hold that date. The current and pending zoning applications we'll talk about. We're really going to spend our time tonight talking about the Norden application that was withdrawn and where we go from here, the next steps, both with Norden and how we move ahead with being proactive on zoning applications. We did want to have a quick discussion, if we have time, on if there's a way that the community as a whole can celebrate having had this application withdrawn, even though there's a possibility that this applicant or another one could come back with something similar, or perhaps something that we would like to see there, or could be something as objectionable. But we'd like to consider something where we can all get together and maybe do something with the hundreds and hundreds of signs that we posted out there in opposition. So if people have ideas and we have time tonight, we're going to kind of bounce that around. The next steps we'll talk about are to see if we can get the city officials and the property owners of Norden to meet with us so that we can understand what's possible there and what the current property owner may be planning. In the short term, we're looking at forming an ad hoc zoning review committee, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. And in the long term, to finally put together a recommendation for a city public engagement manual that would really detail improvements of how the city can better engage the public for these controversial zoning applications. Just a quick update, 93 Winfield Street, which is the Bank of America parcel, that application has been resubmitted. It came into zoning this past Friday. It is now being submitted as a as of right permit, which means there is no public hearing, and it essentially will get approved by zoning if it meets all of the regulations. It's come back in as an 11-unit residential, and we believe that they're going to make their final submission where the units will be condominiums versus apartments. The documents are posted on the city website. We sent the link in our last email, and we have the good fortune of having local architect Lou Garcia doing a similar review of this application again. And if Lou is on tonight, he can jump in and give us an update if you'd like. The Wells Fargo parcel is on a watch list. That's the 1 Cemetery Street parcel of Mill Pond. And that developer is waiting for some zoning regulation changes in line with the East Norwalk TOD project. And then tonight, we're also going to talk about something that you've seen now come up on the radar screen. You may have heard us talk about it in some radio spots as well. there's a number of bills that have been introduced into the state legislature this year for the Connecticut General Assembly to consider that have to do with zoning regulations at a local level. And some of the changes that look like people are proposing in bills will actually potentially give the state more control over local zoning. So people are very concerned about that because zoning is something that's very specific to each individual community and really speaks to the character of the community, the POCD for that specific community. So there's a lot of dialogue around this right now. This week, State Senator Tony Wong and State Rep, I think it's Kim Fiorello, are continuing some town forums that they started holding that are an open discussion on these legislative bills that are being proposed and getting feedback from the community on what it could mean in each town and municipality. There are 2 of those public forums that are being held in our area this week. And when this meeting ends, I'm going to send an email out with the links to those. And I'll also get those over to Charles to see if we can post those on the website as well. So if people want to sit in on those forums. And then I also think that it'd probably be worthwhile to see if our state reps and state senators who represent Norwalk would consider holding a forum here in Norwalk so that people can better understand the implications of those. A little bit more of those coming up. Some new business stuff, just want to throw it out there so you're aware of it. Recreation and Parks has submitted for the funding to do a completely new parks master plan for all the parks in the city. And for ENNA, of course, this would include Cafcaster Beach, Veterans Memorial Park, and Taylor Farm. The reason why we have this on our watch list and we want to make sure that we're engaged with this is that Veterans Memorial Park several years ago had a very extensive master plan done that many people in our community contributed to and provided feedback on, including ENNA. So we want to get a better understanding of where we are with the implementation of that plan and if it's likely to change under a new parks master plan review, or if it's going to get shelved altogether and completely, relooked at for the future. And then you may have seen in the news that the city has hired a new director of transportation, mobility, and parking to replace Catherine Hebert. And because transportation, mobility, and parking are really critical in East Norwalk, and we have some unique situations here that we really want to address for all 3 of those, we're going to see if we can get this fellow. His name is Jim Travers. He's coming out of Stamford, where apparently he was much adored, and see if we can get him here as a guest speaker, probably in April. And then just a quick note on our monthly meeting for March. I'm sure we'll have a packed agenda, but if we can pull it together, we're looking to also include a special recognition of the founder of ENNA, Laurel Lindstrom. And we hope many people in the community know Laurel, and we'd like as many people to come out, albeit via Zoom, to help us celebrate her accomplishments and recognize her in a special way. Okay. Megan, anybody have any questions or anything I need to stop and answer right now before we get into the zoning stuff?
Yeah, there was a question if there were, for the alternate zoning position, if there would be any special qualifications desired, like a traffic engineer, architect, real estate, something.
Yep. And I think there may be a list of those, but they do generally try to look for people that are that do bring some sort of an expertise to the table in terms of evaluating land use applications and zoning regulation changes. But I'm not sure if it's a requirement. And so what we're going to look to do is for each of these positions that's open, we're going to go back to Steve Kleppen and get a write-up from him on exactly how this works and what the requirements might be and how to submit a resume for them.
Okay. And there is one person who said they would like to throw their hat in for that position. So they'll probably appreciate that information.
Yep. Okay. And then if that person would email us at ENNA, that would be helpful, because then I can link up and make sure I get the information to you as soon as possible. The email is info@eastnorwalk.org. So zoning and land use updates. First of all, just so people understand, the reason why you see these on a lot of our agendas is a lot of things that have to do with quality of life and preservation, and our mission for ENNA and East Norwalk does have to do with land use. And a lot of the things that have to do with land use outside of city-owned property really has to do with the applications that come through for development within the community. And that's why you see these things generally on our agendas. And even though there's lots of permits that come through, we're really only particularly concerned with the ones that may seem to be out of scale, or just very large in size, or the land use itself might be controversial. In the case of Norden, that was all three of them. Okay, we just talked about the ones that we have on the watchdog list. For the state legislative bills that I just spoke about, there are two that seem to be winding their way through that may even be coming up for public hearing soon. One is Senate Bill 551 that concerns multifamily housing and accessory dwelling units. The reason why this one is important is this goes back to something we heard rumors about maybe within the last year, that the state would be requiring, and you can read it right here, requiring 50% of the land within a half mile of a transit station and commercial corridors, which would be zoned for multifamily housing and accessory dwelling units. And it would be as of right. And so the implication there is that because we have the East Norwalk transit station, kind of regardless of the TOD plan, if you were to draw the same circle for a half mile around the train station, it could be that even though the city itself might not allow that much density under our own zoning regulations, that there could be something in a state regulation that would require it regardless of our own zoning regulations. So of course we're concerned about that. And then House Bill 6287 is one that deals with a concept called fair share planning and zoning. And that has to do with the equitable or inequitable, as it may be in some cases, the allocation of regional affordable housing needs, and how affordable housing gets addressed across towns and cities, so that the allocation of affordable housing and the requirement to build affordable housing is spread out more equitably across communities. But what that may end up meaning is that there could be a formula that actually dictates to a town or a city what they would have to comply with under a formula that designates affordable housing as in fair share in terms of quantity and possibly also location. So I think while most people are agreeable to the fact that Fairfield County and Connecticut as a whole really needs to do a bit more work in affordable housing and the location for affordable housing, that it could be a slippery slope here when the mandate actually comes from the state telling the municipalities exactly how they have to manage their own land use decisions. Okay, so we are going to open everything up for discussion. Just run through this quick, and we really want to hear from as many people who are at this meeting tonight as we can. So I think everyone knows at this point that starting back in August and going through last Monday, we really had a heck of an opposition effort from ENNA and the community to come out against the Norden proposal for the distribution and warehouse center. And the applicant subsequently withdrew that application on the day of the hearing. So the importance of that is that we really kind of wanted to have it run its course and get denied which would have made it difficult for them or someone else to come in with a similar application. But at this point, it's withdrawn. So we're not quite sure what's going to happen with that applicant in the future. The important thing now with Norden is that we really need to determine the current status of that parcel and what's going on with it right now, to identify if Fortis Group is still the legal owners. People have asked us if the Caber Group went ahead and purchased that half of the building anyway, pending the zoning approval. But it was our understanding from day one that they were only going to purchase it contingent on getting the zoning permit, which obviously they don't have because they withdrew. The other thing that we need to investigate is the property tax delinquency on the parcel as it stands now, because when you're delinquent on your property taxes for a period of time, it's possible that that parcel or that whole building, I guess, could go onto the tax sale block in the next municipal tax sale. The other things that we need to be focusing on and getting some help with is getting back to the P&Z director, Steve Kleppen, and making sure that as we're reading the zoning regulations, that we have a clear understanding of what is allowed at that parcel right now as of right, meaning they could come in with an application, it meets all the regulations, and it would be, for all intent and purposes, it would be approved, and to make sure that we have the right understanding of the special permit uses that are there. And those are the ones that require a more thorough review and a public hearing. And then I think we should have a discussion about whether or not ENNA should go ahead and reach out to the applicant, Caber, and determine if they intend to file an amended application, either for that use or for another use in that part of the building. So the other thing that needs to happen is for the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association geographic area, which is 06855. We're looking to have a couple of ad hoc committees get formed from volunteers within the community and led and kind of overseen by a board member of ENNA. The first one would be to do a complete review of the current and building zone regulations in all of 06855. And we do have the map of all of the zones that are within 06855, and I'll show that in the next slide. And then we also need to have the same committee working with the city to determine which zoning changes are being recommended under the East Norwalk Transit Oriented Development Plan. You may recall that the plan itself was approved, but within that plan, there's a whole segment of zoning regulation changes that are being recommended. Those changes still have to go before the commission, and most, if not all of those changes would require a public hearing. So at this point, rather than kind of be, ambushed by something that appears on an agenda out of nowhere, we really want to make sure that we have an understanding now of exactly what is going to be presented to the zoning commission for their consideration. So those would be the most immediate things. And then soon, meaning within the next couple of months, we'd like to have another ad hoc committee that would finalize a draft of public outreach guidelines for planning and zoning. Several years ago, myself and other people from ENNA and from the Coalition of Norwalk Neighborhood Associations put together a draft public outreach document for the city that they could use in terms of improving public outreach as a whole and public engagement. But the first draft of it really focused on how the city could improve outreach for planning and zoning. Right now, the city basically complies with just the legal requirements to post public hearings in the legal notices in the newspaper. Applicants are only required to do the bare minimum as well in terms of notifying abutting neighbors and posting legal notices in the newspaper. Other communities throughout the country really have beefed up their neighborhood notification requirements based on the size and scope of an application. And I don't want to go into all of it tonight because it's really complicated, but when we form an ad hoc committee, I would be helping with the board member who volunteers to lead this, to walk people through the different types of zoning applications and planning applications, and how we can improve on the public outreach there. The goal is, really in the simplest terms, is that we can't really, there's not a way for ENNA and for this community to really be a participant in understanding development here if our only opportunity to interact with zoning applications is when we see something pop up on an agenda out of nowhere. It just doesn't work. And I think a lot of people now who've been involved for a while have understood that by the time an application is actually posted on the city website, or we're made aware of a zoning application or planning change, that those things have been in progress for months and months. And in some cases, they've been in progress for years. So by the time we have an opportunity to interact as part of the community, they're really kind of almost a done deal. And it's gone, beyond the point of turning back to really revamp something. So the ad hoc committee and working together to get out some public outreach guidelines would really help with this. So don't be intimidated by this map, but this is the map that's actually on the city website, and it's the official map of zoning within the city. It's kind of hard, to zoom in here because I'm in PowerPoint. But basically what you have, if you take a look at this map online, and we also posted it in an email, in the left-hand column, you have all of the zoning designations throughout the city. And the color coding is a little hard to discern within the map because there's so many designations that the colors are pretty close. But as you zoom in on the map on your own on the city website, you'll be able to see the different zoning regulations. Where I'm pointing right now is East Norwalk. And you can see we have a whole bunch of zones right within the East Norwalk neighborhood geographic area. We have industrial 1, we have neighborhood business, we have restricted industrial, we have research and development. And within the residential zones, we have multiple residential zones: A residential, AAA residential, B residential, C residential. And also we have something called marine commercial designation, which you see down here by the beach. Every zone that exists in East Norwalk today needs to have a thorough review by this ad hoc volunteer review subcommittee to go through the codes of what's allowed as of right and what's allowed by special permit, so that we can identify 2 things. One would be some of the objectionable uses that if we were able to modify the code, we would have them removed. A good example of that is Norden in restricted industrial. Had we realized that that was a special permit use there and didn't miss that, we probably could have lobbied to have that removed out of that zone, and we wouldn't have had a Norden application there at all. The other thing as we're looking through these zones is that there may be some uses that we would prefer to see added into the zones that aren't there now. So it's kind of a mix of 2 things as we're looking at the analysis: what's in the zones now, either as of right or by special permit, that we really would want to see taken out of the zone, and what are the things that we think should be considered in the zones that may not be there because they could be relatively new uses that haven't been considered before. All right, I'm going to keep that screen up, and then what I want to do is just kind of open the discussion up now to hear back from people within the community who are on the meeting here tonight on what they, their thoughts on what happened with Norden, how we move forward from that, and to get some comments on specific ideas if you have them regarding on what you think the Norton parcel could be or should be, and also on zoning and zoning uses in East Norwalk in general. And certainly if there's anybody who wants to volunteer for one of these two committees, we can talk about that as well too.
There is one question already, Diane.
Okay.
Do we know why specifically the Norden application was withdrawn?
We don't. So the only thing I've seen so far is that there was no comment either from Attorney Caroline Cavolo, who didn't have anything to add other than the withdrawal that morning. And it did happen that morning. It was like 11:45 in the morning. The withdrawal came in. And then also, Adam Altman from Caber said that he had no comment on it in terms of what could happen now. So, I mean, really, it would just be speculation, but, it could be a whole host or a combination of things dealing with the, the public outcry, the legal efforts. I'm not quite sure if they understood how big that petition that we submitted that weekend really was. And the letters kept pouring in even through the weekend, and they were just really compelling. One of the things that we do know is that an applicant who has an interest in a parcel long-term that may consider other uses really would rather withdraw their application and allows them to come back either with a modified application or something brand new than to have an application denied. In the case of Norden, had it been denied, it would have been under one of two scenarios. It would have been denied with prejudice, meaning the thing is denied. There's nothing really you can do to modify it to come back and reapply for that special permit use. The other one would have been for the commission to decide to deny it without prejudice, cite specific things that were objectionable in the application that the applicant can go back and work on and come back. And there's no time limit then on when they can do that. They can reapply immediately. Versus an outright denial, I think it's a 12-month waiting period before you can come back with an application. So it's a little bit different. So they could, instead of approving it and putting a whole host of conditions on it, they could have denied it without prejudice. And I think the applicant didn't really want that to happen either. So that's what we know at this point. But by the way, I think that ENNA had a large part in convincing the commission that they really couldn't condition this thing enough to make it agreeable, amenable to the community. And, we've long said, if you have an application, a special permit, that you now have 20 or 30 conditions on it to make it work, then it shouldn't have been approved in the first place. So that, no doubt that was a component.
The next question is, what will happen to the funds that were raised for legal fees and such?
Okay, so the legal fees, and I never see the list here, so I don't know if Farhan Memon is on or not from Sasqua Hills.
I don't see him.
Okay, so the Sasqua Hills Association was really formed in order to combat Norden and to be able to take over to raise the funds for the legal opposition. Because of our 501c3 standing with ENNA, we were unable to, we actually voted not to take that role because we didn't know what the implications were to our board and any legal or financial implications for us. The understanding that we had as we did support the legal fund and encourage people to give to it so that the experts could be hired was that that if there was money that was left over in the fund, that they intended to donate it to a local nonprofit. And I believe they even said that the nonprofit would be in East Norwalk proper. So we haven't asked for an accounting. We don't know what the accounting is, if all the money was spent and then some, or if there's money left over. But we do know that it was going to be returned to the community in the forms of a donation.
Great. The next question is, what is the nature of the zoning code changes being considered that relate to the moratorium on special use permits?
Okay. Right now, the moratorium that's in place right now deals with industrial zones and two uses that were approved before the moratorium. One is industrial zones allowed single and multifamily housing, and they also allowed contractor yards. The moratorium that was put in last year was put in to exclude those two uses in particular, as the city embarked on an industrial zone study, which was funded in July and then started, I believe, in October. So while they were studying industrial zones, they wanted to not have permits come in that would be for uses that might change in the future. The interesting thing with that is that ENNA's position on the moratorium was that if you're doing a review of all of the industrial zones in the city, that while that study is going on, there should have been a moratorium on any permit and special permit until the study was substantially complete. So the moratorium that could have included special permits and would have blocked Norden was not included in the moratorium, which went in just a couple of months before Norden made their application. Not sure if I answered the question, but someone may be trying to get me to commit to more of my own personal feeling of the rationale of why it wasn't in there. But just to that point, I will say that ENNA did file a Freedom of Information request to pull documents and meeting records on who in the city of Norwalk was aware of the Norden application prior to it being filed. And essentially what we're looking for is who was aware of it, under what context, and when were they aware of it.
Okay. The next question is with regards to proactively changing zoning regulations. Has this been done in the past, and do we know how open zoning commissions are to change preemptively? Mm-hmm. I'm sure it varies. I'm just curious to know if that's happened before in the past.
Yep. So it does vary, and it has happened in the past where someone either staff, like a zoning director, or planning or zoning commissioners themselves, they see something in the code that either needs to be improved or taken out, or something that needs to be added. So it does happen where a zoning regulation could be changed. And the planning, some things would have to go through the planning commission as well, but that's a lengthier conversation. For zoning commission, it typically depends on how well you present the case for making a change. Typically, if the change is being requested by the city itself, by the zoning director, the zoning commission will look favorably upon it. And the zoning staff may be looking to make a change because they see something that's either outdated. They may see a zoning regulation or permit use that's worded kind of ambiguously and needs to be cleaned up, or any reason. There could also be a zoning regulation change that could come through, other departments in the city that allows the city themselves to do, additional development, things that have to do with parks and public property. I don't have any examples off the top of my head, but if somebody was interested, they can contact us offline, and I can gives them some examples. From the community, there have also been some things that have come through the community when people have been doing zoning regulation reviews in the past, where residents and communities are looking to either reduce the number of special permit type uses within their community, or they're looking to increase other uses coming in. And it could just be changing with the times too, and the economic realities of the changing economy. One of the ones I went through last year, we actually came through staff. It came through Steve Kleppen. He noticed that within neighborhood business zone, the things that are called not breweries, I'm losing the word here. Is it tap room? Is it like a brew tap room or
a brew pub?
A brew pub. Thank you. Not a beer drinker. So he noticed that in neighborhood business brew pubs that were allowed in other zones wasn't allowed in neighborhood business zone. So he proposed that zoning change himself, and then put that through zoning commission. It was kind of curious because typically one of the reasons we're concerned with zoning changes that might come through staff is because there could be a pending application that we're trying to get out ahead of to get the zone change in first before the application. In the case of brew pubs, ENNA didn't take a formal position on it. Our concern was just in terms of location, and the nature of the business tends to be a little bit different than restaurants and things, the way brew pubs have different outdoor activities and events for the public that are really kind of wildly popular right now.
There's a question and a comment from Judy. She volunteers for the zoning review group and says, when I look at Norden, I guess, and it is the only restricted industrial zone in Norwalk, and the zoning on that parcel has changed frequently. I guess that's not a question, but a statement.
Yeah, and there's some history there. I need it in front of me to kind of go through it, but there were specific changes made to that part of the parcel that changed it to restricted industrial so that it could include uses that people thought would be worthwhile. And I think it goes back to the time when some of you may remember when Catherine Gibbs school was actually up there. And so I think that was under part of the restricted industrial that went in, so that you wouldn't have all industrial uses that would be in the industrial 1 zone, that it would be limited to specific uses that would be something that would be desired at that specific parcel. And if you look at that colored zoning map that I had up before, if people get a chance to look at it, if you didn't know before the Norden application, you know now that that industrial zone is pretty unique within the city because of the reasons we fought Norden. It's a great plunk in the middle of the residential areas and what used to literally be, farmland over there in the, I guess as recently as the 50s and everything. The uses for restricted industrial, I think I may have this coming up in a slide, but I just want to mention this now while Judy had her hand raised. When we were opposing Norden, you may have heard ENNA say a few times that we have to be careful what we wish for, because in addition to warehousing and wholesale distribution, there's a couple of other uses right now in the code by special permit that could be as objectionable as that. So one of the things that we really need to take a look at when we're looking at restricted industrial is how these things got in there. And as this committee forms to look at these uses, I hope that, the first thing we do is focus on special permit uses. I think one of which is like helicopter landing pads, and another one is oil and petroleum storage and processing things. But I may have a slide of that actually coming up. Do we have some discussion on moving forward for the Norton parcel itself? Are there folks, and I know that some people have sent in emails to ENNA and also into Steve Kleppen and zoning on some creative ideas on what people thought that whole parcel could be used for. And I wonder if anybody who's on the meeting tonight wants to share some of their ideas. So we're not just focused on what we don't want there, but also to make sure we have a fairly healthy discussion on what the community would like to see there.
I think we've got Judy with the raised hand. I'm not sure if it's about what we were. Are you canceling that, Judy?
No, Judy, you're actually on mute, and we can come back to you. Do we have a second?
All right. Well, I was actually more commenting on things relating to the Norden property. It seems like every time somebody came up with an idea for it, they changed the zoning again. I mean, I was going through it and I saw so many changes to the zoning regulations on that particular piece of property. And I recognize where the Gibbs one came from. And I also know about the helicopter because I was involved in it in a very different type of way. When I was a lawyer, the chief executive of my company wanted to have a landing pad there.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. He was very happy when he heard about it. And then there was a lot of opposition. And I sort of understood the opposition, but it's irrelevant.
No, I just may have an example here. I brought up an example here of C residential zone because we have a lot of C resident zone in East Norwalk. We have a lot of different parcels in all the zones. But just so that people would have an understanding of how to read zoning code, it basically tells you the name of the zone and when that particular zone was added to the code, the purpose and intent of the zone itself, and then it goes into the uses that are allowed by permit, and then it'll typically go into what types of uses are allowed by special permit. And these are the ones you really want to pay attention to because a lot of people who live in residential zones don't understand just how many special permit uses could be approved within a residential zone. And many of them right next to, a residential parcel that's that's a single family house. So this is an example of it. And I may have Norden here. Hang on one second. Let me just see if I have this so that we can bring that one up in front of us. And then I'll take the next question while I'm searching for this thing.
Yeah, Michael has their hand raised. So I'll ask to unmute.
Yeah. Hi, Diane. In terms of information on the tax status and the ownership of the property, why is that such a mystery? I mean, that should be public record. And then secondly, isn't that issue sort of germane to the whole kind of zoning thing? Because I always said, as I said in my letter to the Hour, I always thought this whole thing was the city's backdoor way to collect taxes.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Michael. So it's not really a mystery because it is in the tax records in the city as to who owns the parcel and what the taxes are that are owed right now and how much of those taxes are in the arrears. Also, I think it also goes into what the fines and fees are that would have been levied. So it's out there. It's just a matter of pulling it together so that we can take a look at it. And I think part of the question would be going back to not the tax assessor necessarily, but the tax collector to find out the status of the collection on those taxes. And if and when this particular parcel would get to the point of collections being via the parcel being put up on the tax sale block, which I think comes up in 2021, unless they're going to suspend that based on COVID. And I'm sorry, I missed it. Can you say the second part again, Michael?
Well, I thought, cynically that because Fortis owned the property when we were doing our fight, and we knew that they were in delinquency. And I always thought that this was, the city's back way to collect taxes,
Right.
particularly since it seemed from the few records that I saw that they were in arrears for, at least a year, maybe 2 years.
Right. Yeah, and I think I'm not an expert on how they deal with tax collections, but my understanding is that those taxes are going to be collected one way or the other. So if it's under a new ownership and then part of that purchase price then fulfills the tax obligation, or there's a commitment for the new owner to have to pay the taxes as part of the sale, that's one component. But the other component is the one I was just talking about, is that ultimately the city is going to do something that's going to allow them to collect those taxes. In this case, I would assume that they would be aggressive because honestly, Michael, and probably others of you have seen in the tax sale boards that when they have a tax sale, they are selling the property just essentially to collect the taxes that they're owed on it. They're not looking to make a profit on it. But those parcels actually get posted on a huge board at City Hall so the public can review them in addition to reviewing them online. And you'll see some even modest commercial and residential housing that's on the tax block, and the tax burden in arrears may be something like, a couple of $1,000s, but yet because of the delinquency or the age of it, it goes on the tax block. In the case of Norden, we were looking at, Michael, do you recall what the dollar amount was the last time we looked at it? Like
I
900.
I think it was less than $1 million, but it was probably more than $500,000.
Yeah, I think it was actually, it may have been over $900,000. So that's a lot of money in terms of the tax in arrears. But also, I think the parcel is subject to conveyance tax as well. So the city and state would have had a pretty hefty collection there in terms of the conveyance, just by very virtue of the sale of half of the parcel.
Okay.
I was able to, Megan, before we go to the next comment or suggestion, I was able to go out and find in the city code. By the way, in the last email that I sent, again, I sent the links so that people can take a look at city code and just go through all the zones. But this is the zone for the Norton Parcel. All of that property there is under restricted industrial. And as you go through it, you can see the as of right uses, mostly things doing, manufacturing, processing, and assembly of goods. Many people in the community are open to manufacturing there because it tends to provide long-term, well-paying jobs and doesn't necessarily create a whole lot of traffic. And if it's kind of clean manufacturing or boutique manufacturing, it'd be something that would be welcome. Obviously, research and development is approved there. Public utility and storage facilities, things like, Eversource or Third Taxing District or other utilities could store there. One of the uses that we know we've heard from people is colleges, universities, and because there's such a need for the trades in Connecticut, to also take a look at whether that particular, actually that building itself that was under consideration, whether it could be converted to a trade and workforce training center facility, not unlike what the applicants of 25 Van Zant Street had proposed, I think it's a year ago now. And then also artist workspace is an allowed use there. But then when you get into the special permit uses for restricted industrial is where we get into the ones that the applicant filed under, which was warehouse and wholesale distribution facilities. But right now, today, if this zone doesn't get changed, you could also have oil and petroleum storage facilities. And I think that would be a concern environmentally and also from a traffic and transportation point of view. Judy just spoke about the helicopter landing sites as an accessory to a principal permitted use or a special permit use. Commercial recreation establishments. Some people did talk about having maybe some sort of a teen center or other recreation use there. You could still have residential dwellings, processing, assembly, preparation of passenger motor vehicles. I'm not sure how that would work. And then you could have an expansion of an existing distribution facility within 500 feet of an expanded package distribution facility. So this one I've read a few times. I'm not really sure if I clearly understand it, but it would be something else that would kind of get our radar up on that. So for the Norton parcel in particular, these are the things that we'd be reviewing, not just for what's in there now and starting a process of removing some of these, which that process does have to go to the zoning commission. And I think may require a public hearing, but Steve Clefton could advise us on that. And the second part of it is, what would we like to see as a permitted use as either as of right or special permit that's not in this list? Okay, Megan?
Yeah, there's a question of what does AAA residential mean in relation to the marine, Norwalk Cove Marina is designated marine conservation while Calf Pasture Beach is AAA residential. What does the AAA residential mean?
So those are just designations within, I'm going to see if I can actually, maybe I can get back over to that, is those are designations of the type of housing and the size of housing. I believe height actually goes into the designations of the residential zones. I don't have all of these memorized. Okay, I'll take another question while I'm looking for AAA there.
Yeah, there were a bunch of suggestions for things that people would like to see at Norden.
Okay. I'd like to hear some of them.
Yeah, so we've got a classroom setting, a medical facility or an annex for Norwalk Hospital,
Mhm.
A Wegmans, or use the space for much needed school, elementary or high, especially a trade school, including that which would be a magnet school. Light industrial for electronics manufacturing, as Norden did, green technology products or research and development. Anything that does not cause a crazy amount of traffic / ruin the charm of East Norwalk and is not bad for the environment. Art center, rec center, tech school, garden center plus community garden. And those are all the suggestions so far.
Okay. Yeah, I think those are all really good suggestions, and I think that's why we want to come up with a really comprehensive list, so it's not just all of what we don't want to see there, but what we'd like to see allowed and considered. I do think, and there may be somebody, if there's someone on this meeting tonight who has more information on this, please raise your hand. I believe there are some environmental issues still in terms of remediation on the Norden site. And some of those may be like in perpetuity. I'm not quite sure how bad the contamination was when they had that spill years ago with the triethyl chlorothene. I always say that word wrong, but there was serious spills and some contamination there. So some uses right where we're talking about versus Avalon may be restricted residential only because you couldn't have exposure in a site that's still under environmental remediation. But the other uses that people spoke about would certainly be considered, especially anything having to do with education. And I think it maybe was in another meeting or in some emails to City Hall where people thought you should even consider, there should be consideration of an annex of Norwalk Community College or one of the local universities as well there, because of the proximity of the train station for transit, and it's on the bus line and wouldn't necessarily cause a whole bunch of traffic, but maybe a real benefit to the community. And also either the satellite location to the existing hospital or a larger standalone independent medical center as well. And there's also, I haven't seen it yet, but I know as part of the Norden process that we were going through, so some folks who represent the Bike and Pedestrian Walk Committee in Norwalk, a couple of their members were taking a look at the concept of an all-inclusive residential development there, where the idea is that you wouldn't need to have a car because everything would be included within the community. And these things have been done elsewhere. I think there's one model in this country and another one in Europe, or may have been, trying to think, it may have been one in Dubai. But the idea is that you have a community that you wouldn't need to have a car. And if you did have a need to, leave the community that required a car, that there would be an opportunity to have like shared car services, etc. I like the idea of that. But again, I think it goes back to whether or not the information we have on the environmental issues is accurate. No other questions yet? So let me throw this out there too. As part of the second ad hoc committee that I was talking about with public engagement and outreach, there are, in our recommendations as well, and in addition to other communities that do this, ENNA would really like to see a requirement in our zoning permit process that requires an applicant of either a certain type of an application or a size of an application or the location of an application would require them to meet with the neighborhood. And the way it works is that if there's an established, recognized neighborhood association, the applicant would be required to meet with that association prior to or at the time of filing the zoning permit application. If there's not an established zoning neighborhood association, then the city would assist with the outreach to coordinate and try to get the information out to as many people as possible for the applicant to hold a meeting to describe what it is that they want to do and to get feedback from the community. Typically, the cost of doing that would be the burden on the applicant. Although I've seen in some communities where the neighborhood association actually has to do the marketing and bear the cost of any of the outreach. And also if there has to be like a room rental, if we couldn't do it at City Hall, for example, you'd have to pay for that. But I think it's one of the things that on the front end would be, I think it would be low-hanging fruit in terms of getting this requirement in. I can't imagine a developer that wouldn't want to meet with a neighborhood early in the process to understand what the potential objections could be or what the neighborhood might want to see. And the reason why other municipalities have done this is because almost every municipality goes through what we go through. There's a lot of angst with these controversial applications. There's a lot of mistrust. There's a lot of, again, feeling that everything is already a done deal by the time they do finally reach out to the public. And so by having the meeting early enough in the process and with as many people as possible, you can kind of really start to have a better collaboration with developers. The other thing that I feel too is if a developer had a controversial plan, again, either the use, the size, or the location, and they had to spend their money kind of doing the research on whether this thing would fly or to pay for focus groups, etc. I think it would be beneficial to them to know that they have the resource of a neighborhood association who's willing to take a look at it before they really start spending buku bucks, doing detailed drawings and having all their engineering plans done. Get to the community on the front end and see what you think will fly before you start spending a lot of money. And it would be a free service to them to solicit our input early in the process. The flip side of that is, I know there's people in the room who have dealt with this. The flip side of that is that we just don't want it to be going through the motions as a check the box exercise, because we've had that before. So we've had our zoning management suggest to developers in every part of the city to say to them, it's probably a good idea to reach out to the neighborhood association. And really what they do is they've already defined their plan. They know exactly what they want to do. And they're just going to have the meeting and just kind of pretend to listen. And then they go before the zoning commission and they'll say, oh, we had a meeting with the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association. But they don't necessarily share that the association wasn't happy or had feedback that wasn't being addressed. So if that really were, if we couldn't control that on the front end through what this process, what we want the process to be about, then I would be, respectful of everybody's time at ENNA that we wouldn't bother doing that, because it can just end up being a waste of time. We actually saw that with 230 East Avenue, the Brim and Crown at the train station, very unfortunately. I hope, I'm not jumping off to check my emails, but I hope even as people are watching that they're sending in some emails and volunteering to help. The ENNA board, as you can see, is a small group. We all work full time, so we volunteer in as many part-time hours as we can to do as much as we can to keep people informed and engaged. But we really do need some hands-on with these initiatives as we go forward. A lot of you guys will know from meetings that were at the end of 2019 and in 2020, as we were going through TOD, that we wanted to get some of these initiatives going in 2020. And we just didn't have time between COVID hitting and having to meet offline, but then getting hit with the final efforts that we had to go through to try to course correct on TOD. And then we had the Winfield application and then the Norden application. So we've been consumed with that. And of course, we have the Wells Fargo parcel on the watch list as well. And we still want to be able to have guest speakers come in from different city agencies and other groups of interest. So we really do need help. ENNA is really your organization, the neighborhood association. By virtue of living in 06855, you're automatically a member. And, we appreciate donations as well, but we really could help, use the help of people stepping up and volunteering for some of these subcommittees. It could be, if you have a skill in doing research, we always need people who can do research. If you are skilled in compiling information and putting it into a format that we can really digest and understand what the possibilities are. People that have skills in putting together presentations, and then community outreach as well. Questions, comments, suggestions, anything having to do with ENNA, anything having to do with zoning, other initiatives?
Yeah, we have a raised hand from Tracy. Tracy, I'll ask you to unmute.
Hello, everybody. Hey, Diane.
Hi, Tracy.
I just want to say thank you for organizing everything you did for Norden. And I know I speak for all of my neighbors who aren't even on this call right now at the moment, but you are our hero. And you've mobilized so many people to be involved. I know it's a group effort, but you're a leader. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I really appreciate that. It was a long haul on that. And I do want to say it is really is a group effort. There were so many people involved, in addition to the board. And as much as we were able to do and stay on top of this thing, 24/7, I really think it's a credit to the community. And I wrote this in an email. Literally the thousands of signatures and hundreds of letters that went into City Hall, no doubt had a major impact on this thing getting withdrawn. But people really stepped up and did what they could do. Between, writing a letter to the editor, putting, lawn signs in their lawns, which I think were really impactful. We had a number of people actually in the bitter cold. Thank you to those folks who went out in the bitter cold and distributed flyers, everybody that came to the rallies. So appreciate that, Tracy. It is a group effort, and happy to do it. And, happy we got to this point with, with where we are with getting that withdrawn. So it does work. It works.
It does. Also, I just wanted to mention, I don't know if everybody knows that Bruce Lavello moved on to a different division for our community policing officer for East Norwalk.
Yep.
If anyone has had a chance to meet Jamie, I've known him for many years.
Oh, great.
But we have a new patrolman, and he's amazing. Yeah. He has a lot of experience in East Norwalk because he was a crossing guard for Marvin at that dicey intersection at the now new Rotary. But if you have a chance to introduce yourself, he's truly one of the nicest policemen you'll ever meet, and loves our community and will do everything he can for us.
Yeah, thank you for that. He actually was at our last meeting. And so when we sent out an email blast to let everyone know that Officer Jamie Wright was coming on, he's got big shoes to fill because, Bruce Lavello really looked out for all of us here in East Norwalk. So Jamie knows that. And he may be, again, I can't ever see who's ever on the meeting, but he may be on here tonight. So we will have him as a guest speaker because he's a community policing officer. And I believe the head of community policing also recently changed, so we'll have them in. We like to have them in once a year as a guest speaker. So sometime over the next few months, and I gave Officer Wright a heads up, and he's happy to do that. He also, just so you know too, when we had our second big rally up on Strawberry Hill over by Maplewood, he had the patrol division there with him. So for the people that saw a couple of cop cars there thinking maybe they were coming to make arrests of protesters, that was not the case. They were actually there to make sure that we were safe and, patrolling and monitoring the traffic on Strawberry Hill. So I did get a chance to talk to him right after the event while a couple of the patrol cars were still there, and thanked him. And he really, thank you, Tracy, because he really does seem like a great guy. And really has our best interests at heart. So if you're on here, Officer Wright, thank you. And we will have him as a guest in the next few months, hopefully before summer.
Cool. There is a question that I guess is loosely related to the police. And they said from Jason and Diana Christopher, they said, my apologies if I'm jumping the gun and this will fall under new business. Wanted to see if you could quickly address crime issue, neighborhood watch. Are they effective?
Yep. So I'll give 3 quick things on that. So I sent an email to Officer Wright. We're going to be looking to check on if they can share with us what a typical patrol would be in East Norwalk. Because we recently saw some chatter on social media that people felt that our routine patrols are basically on the main roads and very little patrolling on the side streets. And we do know that police patrols act as a deterrent. But also residents have a higher comfort level in community policing and patrolling as a whole when they're seeing patrols at different hours of the day and night on their street. In terms of neighborhood watch, it's always a good idea, whether it's a formal group or not, for people to, I know it sounds kind of cliche, but if you see something, say something. A lot of times people think that there may be something suspicious going on, but they're hesitant to call the police department. Officer Wright and Officer Lavello, community policing, and Chief Kahalik will all be the first ones to tell you that they want you to call. And so if it's not an emergency, obviously don't dial 911. You'll want to dial the non-emergency police department number, which is 203-854-3000. And you can still get through to dispatch through that, or you can get through to a desk officer and report what you need some help with. But I do think Neighborhood Watch is effective for your own street. People that have Ring and other cameras are also being encouraged to share footage if you hear of a crime in your area. One of the things that we'll be bringing up with Officer Wright that we've brought up in the past is years ago, our community policing, even before it was called that, the officers who had kind of patrol responsibility for this sector of the city would provide the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association with police reports on crime. We get the reports on a quarterly basis so that we could kind of review if there were pockets of things going on, where patrol might be, where they should concentrate their efforts. But since that, community policing was formed, and it's the community policing supervisors for each of the, I think there's 6 sectors now in the city to have community policing, maybe less than that. But the community policing supervisors now are charged with monitoring activity related to crime and police response so that they can be more proactive when they see something that needs attention. But I think ENNA would still like to see the reports. In one of the last public forums that we had on crime in East Norwalk, our theme was actually called a crime. It had to do with whether or not it was just perceived. So sometimes you'll have a flurry of car break-ins, or there could be, an armed robbery or two. And suddenly the perception is that, there's crime all over East Norwalk, when really you're just seeing an increase in the reporting of something. And it's, not nearly as serious as people make it out to be. Conversely, we often know about crimes through word of mouth, nextdoor.com, social media, and we're not seeing those things reported in the press or being reported back to us by the police department. So it's as important for us to have some eyes on it and speak up when we think that there's something going on. And then folks may remember a couple of years ago that ENNA started lobbying for, and we're still a proponent of, trying to talk the city into using an initiative that other communities use, where you would have an empty patrol car stationed and parked at various sites around East Norwalk, because even a patrol car itself acts as a deterrent to crime. So even if there's no one in the car, and there's always empty, cars on shifts, that we could utilize that as a tool. And then the final thing I'll say on that, Megan, is that in the TOD project that we all participated in, many people were interested in having a local storefront act as a police substation. So not only would we have community policing, but we could have a substation right here in East Norwalk, where you kind of get to know Officer Jamie and the other officers that are on the beat here. It wouldn't necessarily be manned 24/7. Of course, you couldn't do that, but it could be regular hours that vary between daytime, weekend, and evenings, so that all segments of the community have an opportunity to interact. You could go in and you could chat about something you might not want to make a formal report on. You could just understand more about how the police operate, and or just go in and have a cup of coffee and just chat about the neighborhood. I still would like to see that. I think a lot of people would. Oh, I can't hear you, Megan.
I muted myself. I have a question from Jim Anderson, so I'll ask them to unmute.
Hey,
Hi,
Jim.
Diane. Yeah, I'm just curious on the Avalon complex that's behind Norton's. I remember years ago, the neighborhood, we posed a concern about the increased traffic that would cause. Has there been any issues, increase in number of accidents, concerns from local residents since it's been built? It's there now probably 3 or 4 years now at least.
There's thanks, Jim. There has been complaints that kind of periodically come up from the people who live in the immediate area of the traffic at the times you would suspect, in the morning when people are going to work and when people are coming home from work. As you know, East Norwalk Neighborhood Association was one of the main reasons why that development isn't as big as it was originally proposed, for some of the reasons you just stated, actually. So there hasn't been a lot of concern around that. There's been some concern. There's concern around it, but at the peak times, like we just spoke about. I haven't heard a lot about accidents in general, but it's the type of thing that would be in the 06855 stats that we would be looking to get from the police department again. I do know that just the other day I wrote to Officer Wright because a report came in of a large truck at Norden Place that hit a pole, and the pole was down. So, and I don't know if it was a tractor trailer truck. I don't know the nature of the pole. I got the initial report in from him was that it was a truck versus pole, and there were no injuries reported. And that would have to go to the patrol officer who would write up the report to see if there's any video footage or pictures of it. Because we know something will be coming to Norden, and that's the type of information we'd like to show to say, here's the proof right here of people not being able to maneuver the turns over there. I think there's also been some other issues with Avalon. I just think that has to do with the nature of apartments being more transient than people planting, kind of planting roots there. But I'm not sure the impact of, that it has on the community that's nearest to Avalon. Does that answer your question, or?
Yeah, that's your last point as far as rental versus condominium. I'm happy to see, and I've asked this question to a number of developers, especially the most recent of being the last 2 or 3 years of just rental as opposed to ownership. For instance, the one that's being built or is built right next to the train station here over East Avenue, completely rental and transient occupants. I was just curious about the Avalon one, and I know being part of that somewhat back then and managing the complex right across the street from it, Woodfield Common, there was concerns there also, but not really vocal. And but yeah, you're right. It was going to be a much larger, and they actually were going to exit out of Westport, and that didn't happen either.
You're right, exactly. Yeah, and thank God that the conservation easement is still in place there. That was another battle the year before this other Norden came in. So we, obviously we had a win there to preserve that. I do want to say, and Jim, you'll be familiar with this, is that when zoning applications go through where there's controversy over the level of traffic, because no traffic expert has ever said anything except no significant impact, as we all know. Zoning does require on major traffic generators and other large developments that a post-development and while at full occupancy, that a post-traffic study be done to analyze the amount of traffic and the time. Now, that's all well and good to kind of go back and say, how did this materialize? Unfortunately, there's nothing that you can really react to with that. You can't unring the bell once you have approved something, even if the traffic is significantly higher. You don't really have a lot of recourse in how you can correct that once something is already built. You may just be able to mitigate it by maybe looking at having alternative, entrances and exits again, or hopefully not, but like putting in additional traffic lights and traffic control to deal with it. But we're not really a proponent of that either. So the fact that they do a post analysis on the traffic doesn't really mean anything, because there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, it's a good ruler basically. For instance, if it is converted to a medical or a educational facility, or whatever, you do have existing now increased traffic on a regular basis or some sort of guideline of a residential basis.
Right.
And, back into that, what you have now and what may be proposed in the future.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, because at least then you would know what you really have now versus what was projected, right?
Mhm.
Because everything that's incremental to it, you want to have the most accurate numbers that you can get. Yeah.
And thank you again, Diane. You're phenomenal.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Group effort, but thank you. Okay. Any other questions or? Well, while we have a lull in the conversation too, I'll also say, in addition to the couple of committees that we're looking for ENNA, in terms of zoning and those regulations, I think we're going to need a couple of bodies looking at the state legislature bills that I spoke about earlier. Some of these things kind of run through the legislature rapid fire. They're not always easy to understand. And the public hearings aren't the easiest to participate in. So we're going to have to sink our teeth into exactly what actually makes it through committee to become a bill that's going to have a hearing, and then get the word out to the community as quickly as we can as to how they can provide public comment back to the state legislature on some of these bills that are pending. So if anyone wants to volunteer on that level, and I think what ENNA can do in the meantime is see if we can maybe try to coordinate a quick forum here in Norwalk with some of the guys that are doing some of the regional forums on this would be good. Reading some of the chat there now. I think someone else volunteered as well, which is good. So we'll have the chat transcript, and I think Megan is also making a note. And you can also email us at info@eastnorwalk.org to either get more information or to volunteer. And if you want to volunteer at all to help with any of the heavy lifting load that the board has, just send us an email and tell us what you're interested in or what your particular talent is, or something you'd like to learn more about, and we'll find a spot for you. In fact, I'm meeting with a volunteer next Monday night who's probably on this call, who's volunteering to help with some analytics and some communication and public outreach stuff for us, which is great.
Diane?
Yep.
I have a question, if I may.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how you doing? Good to see you.
Good, DJ.
93 Winfield Street.
Mhm.
I'd like to ask a question, and I have a thought, and it may have already been suggested and possibly been looked into, but I was a commissioner at the taxing district a number of years ago. And as you know, the district maintains a number of city parks around in East Norwalk. And it would certainly be nice if they make a mini park right at 93 Winfield Street. I think that would neighbors, it would enhance the area and make sense. But I don't know if that was ever posed to third taxing district or not.
So a couple of things on that. As this development came to light last year, a lot of people did suggest that one of the things they'd like to see there would be to convert it to a park. It is privately owned, as you know. So the developer who owns it would have to be agreeable to either donating or selling it to the district. I didn't see anything. I don't think anybody actually raised the point of the district looking to the third taxing district, by the way, is kind of a semi-quasi-governmental agency. One of the things that they are allowed to do that people are surprised to hear is that they can take property by eminent domain for public use. But I don't think that they've ever exercised that, and I don't think that they're inclined to do that. But it would be something great if they had a conversation with this developer to maybe either have the land donated or to see what the purchase would be for it. Just so that you know, though, the new application was filed on Friday. An as of right permit came in for 11 units. that they haven't really committed to it yet, but it looks like they are leaning to making the units condominiums, because then at the 11 unit rate, it may make more sense for them financially to do that. So they are still pursuing residential on that parcel.
Okay, I just thought I'd throw that out for information.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of people mentioned that would be a good little place for a pocket park there. And other people still wanted to see it used as a commercial venture. I barely remember it, but I do know that it was the restaurant before it was the bank. It began with a V. What was you would know the name of it?
I
It
should.
was Valenti's restaurant.
What was it, Jim?
It was Valenti's restaurant.
Oh, Mark Valenti's restaurant, right?
Right.
So people
There
said
for
they,
years.
wouldn't even be opposed to something like that again, or another commercial venture that wouldn't be heavily disruptive to the neighborhood. I think everyone was in agreement, though, like not to have something that's a drive-through, because that's kind of a nightmare.
Diane, was
But go ahead.
district ever asked or approached regarding a park over there?
Not that I'm aware of, no. Nope. Not by the applicant. I know that they're aware of it only because it was, involved in a special permit application, or they should be aware of it, but not by the applicant. No, not that I'm aware of. And nor do I think that there was anybody from the commission that reached out to the applicant, but they may have. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
I was actually hoping, so the preliminary plans were submitted on Friday, and local architect Lou Garcia is taking a look at them now. When you get a chance to look at them, I put up just one rendition in the last email, but you can see that the developer chose to still orient the largest of the buildings that abut the neighbors who were the most impacted there, right on top of their property line. But they also have a not so attractive orientation, again, facing the people that are right there on Howard Avenue. So unfortunately, because it's 11 units and it's a regular permit, there's not a whole lot of say that the zoning commission will have in terms of either the layout or not approving it. That zone, and this is another example of where they're only allowed to do that because that zone was not changed from neighborhood business to C residential. And it could have been changed before that application came in, much the same way Norden could have been changed before that application came in. So it's unfortunate. And I think that speaks volumes, you guys, to the urgency of getting together these two committees, these ad hoc committees of volunteers to start combing through the zoning regulations. And it's laborious and it's not the most fun reading, but I think the sooner we do it, the sooner we can get out ahead of these things and get back to zoning staff and to the zoning commission to say, here's some things in here that we wouldn't want to see happen, and what steps do we need to take as a community to initiate getting them changed. If we had done that in these two cases, we wouldn't be in the boat that we're in today. And we're about to be in the same boat potentially with the Wells Fargo parcel as well. Anybody else with comments, suggestions?
Gregory Payne suggested that they thought the Wells Fargo lot and or the Masonic Lodge would make a great site for a park or a municipal rose garden type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think Wells Fargo, again, privately owned, unless it was a donation or, looking for a purchase either through the city or through their taxing district, it wouldn't be that easy. But I think considering the proximity of the Wells Fargo parcel, literally at the at Mill Pond there, it's something that we certainly would hope would have been considered. But in the absence of that, we hope that there's a design that's forthcoming that respects the environment there and the public's ability to be able to have access to Mill Pond. Masonic is an interesting thing because at Gregory Boulevard there. We're not quite sure what's going on with that parcel. We've seen some recent activity there, but there's nothing that's come through that I've seen that would lead me to believe that they're changing hands or anything, or that they would consider a different use. I think they just recently merged with another Masonic lodge, so that's the larger of the two. Jim, I see you shaking your head though. If you have more, can you jump in with more information on Masonic?
Yeah, absolutely. I spoke to the commander that's there, and they have no interest in selling the building right now. The artists workshop who were there, oh God, I think at least I live across the street, well, behind them. The artist workshop that was there for about 30, 35 years, I think I mentioned it once before, they recently moved out.
Right.
So that one space, and that's a smaller portion of the building. The larger portion of the building is used by the two lodges, or the two councils of the Masons. And they did combine a couple of years ago. And again, they have no interest in selling, but you never know if the price tag comes up.
The price is
Their
right.
membership is dwindling, just like a lot of the memberships of existence now, including the Legion and Sons of Italy and all that I'm involved in.
Right.
I do want to mention about the Wells Fargo thing, and it's owned, I believe, by Discala Properties. Is that correct?
Right. He was our guest at the at our October meeting, and to kind of tell us just some ideas he has for the parcel, but wasn't able to show us any of the preliminary plans yet. But yeah, he owns it and will be developing it as soon as the zoning reg changes for TOD go through.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's all I know about that.
Yeah. And it's a mix of residential that's going to be high end, kind of senior empty nester type housing. And the bank will still stay on the parcel, but in a new building that's over to the left side that abuts Gregory Boulevard. That's really all we know at this point. The Masonic Lodge is interesting too, though, because if the performing arts group that was in there, the theater group, is no longer using that space, and perhaps there's an opportunity for community space there, either no charge for nonprofits or a nominal charge, because we're always looking for meeting room space and for a community space for different community activities. So maybe we'll reach out to them at some point and just discuss that possibility, if they're going to stay there. I think they've been a good neighbor, as best I can tell, for all the years they've been there, but you live right there. So
They really are a good neighbor. Whenever, actually, the policeman always park, Jamie actually parks behind the building oftentimes. And I
good.
sat and bought him coffee a couple of times. But
There you go.
they have been a good neighbor.
Yeah, tell Jamie if he's parking behind the building, park in front. That's where we want these cars to be visible out there. You just got to walk further to bring them some coffee there, a hot chocolate. Okay, guys. As usual, there's like always a gazillion other things that we could talk about. There's just so much going on in East Norwalk. Always. And if anybody has any new business that they want to bring up, if there's some concern on the table that ENNA needs to talk about, if you can raise your hand now. Otherwise, we've gone a bit over, and we'll wrap it up for the evening until March and deal with everything else via email. Is there anybody else that has a comment, suggestion, question, any quality of life concern that ENNA should be aware of? No, Megan, nothing there? Okay.
Nope, nothing showing.
I just want to take the opportunity now before we close out, just to thank the members of the board for everything everybody did in terms of Norden, and all the members of the community, both within East Norwalk Neighborhood Association. And if any of the folks are on this meeting from across the line over in 06851, they really stood to be impacted as much from this, and really rose to the occasion in terms of letters and signage and the rally. And we may have a couple of people on board tonight from the Westport group, and we want to share our thanks and appreciation to the folks on Westport, the residents, and also the planning and zoning and their first selectmen, who also backed us and opposed that application. So needless to say, we'll keep an eye on it. We'll try to get some more information on the withdrawal and on some information on what might be coming up there. And we look forward to getting some volunteers to get these committees going so that ENNA can be proactive and start, protecting our turf and defining what we want for the future.